Nothing withers life more than grief. Yet grief rarely acts alone, without its best buddy, guilt. Questioning guilt and grief is a worthwhile meditation. When someone dies, or when I have a loss of any kind, I can feel victimized. What I was depending on just collapsed. I am disoriented, and the mind keeps circling back to what was or what could have been, which only intensifies the grief. It's like a broken record. She shouldn't have died. She's gone. I want her back. These hopeless thoughts are the fuel of grief as the mind tries to attack what it can't change. It reaches for something or someone to blame. Sometimes there's a person at fault and the mind lands there. Sometimes it's life that I blame. But sometimes the mind circles back to blame myself. When it does, I feel guilt. In its quest to avoid accepting the reality of the loss, the mind digs up all kinds of things. I should not have refused the package from mom that she sent to me so many years ago. That really hurt her feelings. Or I should not have moved one time without telling her. That hurt her as well. If I dwell on these things that I did or didn't do, I can start feeling very guilty. What does guilt accomplish? For me, guilt is a distraction, a kind of irrational way of trying to regain control. If only I had accepted that package, then I could let her go in peace. If only I had been a better communicator with her, then she would know without a doubt how much I loved her. This is the mind's way of trying to rewrite the past in order to have peace in the present. The problem is, that's impossible to do. The past is over. I have no control over the past. In fact, I like to think of the past as none of my business. So guilty thoughts basically lead nowhere but back to grief. Somehow, the cycle of guilt and grief must be broken. The problem with grief is that the loss really did happen. And the problem with guilt is that I often really did do some regretful things. So the mind meets with no resistance as it spins around in its little circle of grief and guilt. The only thing that can stop it is a bigger truth. Here's my favorite way to look for a bigger perspective for my spinning mind, called the Work of Byron Katie. And the work is a meditation that slows the mind down. It starts by picking a stressful thought, a guilt thought, for example. I write it down verbatim as it comes out of my mind. I should have told mom I was moving. Now the thought has been captured, and this alone goes a long way to stop the mind from spinning. But this is just the beginning. The Work of Byron Katie slows it down further by questioning the validity of the thought. I should have told mom I was moving. Is it true? This is meditation. Guilt and grief slow down when I find understanding for myself. When I go through this process of inquiry and look back on my life at the time, I find that I was actually desperately trying to stand up for myself in my 20s when I didn't tell her that I was moving. I went against my mom's preferences for how I should live my life. I moved without telling her because that's the only way I could see to stand up for myself. When I see it this way, I find understanding for myself, and my guilt no longer grips me. This simple process of questioning my stressful thoughts is how I worked through the grief when my mom died, one thought at a time. And I invite you to do the same. And I'll end with a quote from Byron Katie from her book, 1,000 Names for Joy. Humility is what happens when you're caught and exposed to yourself. And you realize that you're no one, and you've been trying to be someone. You just die and die into that truth, into the truth of that. You die into what you have done and who you have been, and it's a very sweet thing. There's no guilt or shame in it. You become totally vulnerable, like a child. Defense and justification keep falling away, and you die into the brilliance of what is real.